Hi babe, welcome to my channel Intentionally Nia, where I teach you how to use astrology intentionally. And today we're going to do something really fun. We are going to be talking about the asteroid Aphrodite, which I have spoken about very often on this channel, on my TikTok, and elsewhere. And I've really been doing a lot of research and really just kind of digging into it. And I found some things as I was doing my Aphrodite readings and looking at celebrities. I found some things that I thought were really cool correlations. Astrology is all about patterns, and I started to kind of pick up on certain patterns, and I wanted to explore it more. And this video is with me sharing those findings. So the settings is 20s. So the settings is the 2000s, okay? It's the 2000s, and we are going to the R&B side of things. That's kind of why I'm dressed like this. I tried to give my best 2000s look, fashion-wise, but we are going to be looking at Aphrodite through the 2000s, from 2000 to 2010, so those early 2000 area, and we're looking at R&B and hip hop girlies only. We are focusing on women, on female artists, and who was popping at that time, okay? I will get into my criteria, what I found, all of that, but before I do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer and background around Aphrodite that I think is really important. Aphrodite is an asteroid. Aphrodite, really, in my view and how I look at it, it talks about what gets you attention, what people like to see from you, right? So what do other people's eyes go to? We also have Venus, and Venus and Aphrodite are similar. However, the difference is, one, Venus is a planet and Aphrodite is an asteroid. That's to start there. So of course, Venus is going to be used for a lot more things, right? Venus can be used for money, for relationship, for fashion, for beauty, all of those things, and it will tailor it to you. But Venus also can talk about your relationship with others and how they relate to you, etc. Aphrodite is more like what catches people's eye about you specifically. It's not necessarily about the relationship that you have with others. It's more so just about how do you get somebody's attention. What does someone's eye go to? What does someone's attention go to when they see you? And so it's an asteroid. It's a smaller area and the smaller topics that it will deal with, but it can really be helpful because it does show where you get a lot of attention and you don't really have to do much. If you can tap into your Aphrodite placement, where it is, what house, the degree, all of those things, and really understand what kind of works in your favor and is already working for you, you can just use that on a large scale, right? If you're looking for more attention, if you're looking for more popularity, if you're looking to make a man or woman fall to their knees, Aphrodite can help with that. Okay, so what provoked me to do this study? I, again, have been working with the Aphrodite Asteroid, doing personal readings for people, as well as just kind of looking at like my favorite celebrities, singers, and looking at their Aphrodite placement. And what I found is certain artists in a certain time period had very similar Aphrodite placements. I would see, and that's because Aphrodite is an asteroid. It moves a lot slower. It's a generational planet. So, but what I thought about is, like, if we're thinking about it being the dream girl, the it girl, the popular girl, right? I was like, well, it kind of gives a view of the girlies, why the girlies who were prominent at that time, why they were prominent at that time. Like, it gives us another view, along with Neptune, along with Venus, if you will, but more on a generational side. Neptune is going to take that that'll be the planet that you would really go to. But I thought that Aphrodite had something to offer, and based on my research, I think I was right. So what I did was I looked at about 39 to 45 artists, female, in the R&B arena or hip hop, and it was small back then. Like it wasn't a lot to choose from, and my criteria was needs to be somebody who was on the charts. Like, you had to dominate. Even if you dominated one time, I could include you as long as you were on the charts and you were prominent and it's somebody that if I say your name, people know who I'm talking about, right? That's one. Two, you have to have an impact, whether it's in beauty, fashion, or just desirability, right? So like, were you just the girl that everybody wanted to be and the guys wanted to get with? And you can be one or the other. You can be in multiple categories, and a lot of these artists were in multiple categories. And I would just count that. So that gave me about a group of 40 artists, female, in the R&B and hip hop space. And what I found is, so the highest Aphrodite placement of this era was Aphrodite in Sagittarius, which I'm not surprised, but it makes a lot of sense. And then the next findings that I had was that the Mutables really took it when it came to as far as the different modalities. The Mutables took it as being the most, right? So we saw a lot of Sagittarius, they were the dominant sign, but we also saw a lot of Pisces, that was the second dominant. And then after that, we did see Virgo and we saw Gemini. Gemini probably was the third dominant. And then the next modality was Cardinal. Cardinal signs were up there. And that kind of was really interesting because it leads me to another theory that I'm going to do a whole other video about, but the cardinal signs were up there. We had Cancer, we had Capricorn, those were the top two dominant ones, but we also had Aries and we had Libra as well. And the other thing that I found was, okay, after I got the list and I found out what their Aphrodites were and I was able to see what the dominant Aphrodite placement was for this time period, then I went through, because we're talking about a decade. So I went through from 2000, the year of 2000, who was on the charts and what was their Aphrodite placement. And then I also went through and looked at, in the 2000s, what signs did Aphrodite transit through? And what I found was every single year, not every girly who was on the charts, but at least one girly who was on the charts had their natal Aphrodite in a sign that was transiting that year. And I'll talk about later on why that is important to me, and why that makes sense or what that can tell us. Okay, so with Sag being the dominant Aphrodite asteroid placement for this time period, so this is amongst the girlies. So we're looking at their natal Aphrodite placement. Sag being that dominant one kind of makes sense. Sag is fun, it's positive, it is adventurous, and it adds a pop of color and a loudness and a boldness about whatever it touches. And so if we're putting it in the space of beauty and fashion, Sagittarius is going to be loud and proud, and it's going to be daring and try different things. This is where we're getting the prints from. This is where we're getting the loud colors. And I often think of cheetah, but I also think of sporty when I think of Sag, because Sag would like to mix and match amongst its different types of clothing, right? So we know that baggy pants was a big thing during that time. Baggy pants with a small top. Lots of glitter. Glitter was so there, and I find that to be extremely Sag. Like, lots of glitter, lots of shimmer, from the makeup to the fashion. There was a shininess about the 2000s, particularly from the 2000s from 2000 to 2010. And also just that attention for having confidence and knowing who you are. Sagittarius is a sign that is confident and almost to the point where it feels arrogant. A Sagittarius is a sign that studies what moves people, right? Because it's studying culture. So it's studying what is moving for people in general across a large scale. Gemini is going to look more at the details and the actual data, whereas Sagittarius is like, what is the group up to? You know, what does a culture, what creates a culture, what is creating culture. And I do feel like Sagittarius being an Aphrodite during this time period does make sense, because I feel like there is like a 2000s culture, right? Like for sure. And I think every decade has its culture. I think that the 90s was really prominent, and I also think the 2000s had a very prominent culture. Whereas when we get into like the 2010s, I feel like that kind of bleeds, had its marks, but it does bleed a little bit more into other decades. And so being associated with, so Sagittarius being associated with this era makes sense to me because of how invested and interested Sagittarius is in culture and in how people operate as a group, as a community. And also, I do think that the women during this time were taking chances, stepping out, right? Like, we think about, and being unique in how they did it, right? When we think about the girlies who came out, they had an individualism about them. Each person had a different fly, a different type of fly, a different reason why you liked them. And that is extremely Sagittarius, because it's super individual, and because it's so bold and so forward and in your face, like, it's extremely hard to duplicate. And I do think that the girlies who were on the charts during this time were hard to duplicate. So why were the mutables dominant during this time? In my case study, like I said, the modality that had the most amount of signs during this time was the mutable. Think about each mutable sign. You can see it in how it played out in each artist during this time, right? So let's start with Sag. If you think about Sagittarius, my mind kind of goes to Beyonce and even Alicia Keys, right? Beyonce and Alicia Keys were focused on being bold and standing out. Alicia Keys came out with a very unique look and sound. The way that she was singing was unique to her. The way that she looked was unique to her, and it was bold. It was in your face. Like, you couldn't. She was gonna make sure you heard her, okay? Like, she was gonna make sure you heard her. And Beyonce had a lot to prove going solo, so she made sure that she was daring. She came out screaming. She came out screaming with "Work It Out." That girl was hollering, like, but it was extremely sad because, again, she was paying attention and giving tribute to a culture and a time that resonated with her. Like, she was Tina Turner coded, she was 70s coded, right? So, like, that is the era that she grew up in, and that meant a lot to her, and so she paid tribute back to it. That's extremely sad between the two of them, right? And then when we think about Gemini, we have Toni Braxton and Faith Evans, Aphrodite and Gemini, and they also told stories in a way more detailed way, right? So with Toni Braxton, I think of Just Be a Man About It. He wasn't man enough for me. Unbreak My Heart. There's a story being told in that music. And her voice, Gemini, can be Taurus too, but also Gemini, her voice makes you listen and makes you remember her. Faith Evans, again, Used to Love Me. That's a whole story. Soon As I Get Home, like, their music is about storytelling. It's about pulling you into whatever scene and whatever they're going into, and you almost didn't need a video for their stuff, because you can imagine whatever the situation is just listening to the song. Like, you're going to be imagining it in your head. That's Gemini. When we get into Virgo, so two women who were prominent during this time who had Aphrodite and Virgo is Maya and Remy Ma. And they were also bold, but they talked more about working what you have, right? So Virgo is the sign that is going to take inventory, that talks about, okay, this is what we have, this is how we make it work at its most optimal way, right? That is what Virgo is about. It's about analyzing what we have, taking it and making it better. How do we elevate it? How do we take it to that next level? Remy Ma came out the gate talking about, look, I got what I got. And I feel good about it. I'm conceited about it, right? Like, you're not gonna be able to tell me nothing. Everything that I want, it already feels good to me. That is really Virgo as well. Virgo beauty is also about it's a very natural beauty. Obviously, it's an earth sign, and it's about working what you've got. Virgo is also a model sign. Like, it's a sign that talks about and that can point to being a model, at least in my view. So I think of Remy Ma taking what she has and says, well, y'all might feel a way about it, but I'm going to talk about it in the way that feels good to me. That's elevating, that's taking it to that next level, right? Maya had a lot of songs about also being self-empowered. Her first song that she came out with, which I feel like she was entirely too young to be talking about that. But anyway, too young. But it's all about me. That's, look, this is what I like. Tonight you're going to focus on what I like and what I want to, you're going to focus on what I want to feel. My love is like, whoa. Again, celebrating what you come to the table with, celebrating what you have and elevating it and making it even better than what you might have perceived it with when you looked at it. I'm going to tell you why it's actually amazing and shiny. That's Virgo. And then we have Pisces. And the Pisces was an interesting one because I was like, how do I describe this? So a couple things came to mind. Two women who had Aphrodite and Pisces and were prominent during this era was Nivea and Tierra Marie. And it's something very similar about both of their careers. So for one, what we can say about Nivea is Nivea set the stage and the groundwork. She truly did. She did not get the push and the propelling that she needed. And I feel like a lot of things that Nivea was coming into the game with ended up being popular and amazing after the fact. And I can imagine how hurtful that is. But Nivea had the colored hair. She had this, but she really did contribute to the look of 2000. She's someone that stands out a lot in my brain when we talk about how 2000s looked. And then when we talk about Tierra Marie, and this might be something personal for me because I remember How to Make a Girl Feel. Again, I was entirely too young to be, but I loved that song. And Tierra was 16. Like, Tierra was 16. I believe Nivea was 16 when she first came out as well. Tierra had a look about her that you just didn't forget. Tierra was very raw in her approach. I think that Nivea got marketed to be a lot softer than she actually was, whereas Tierra, I think they gave her an edge. Again, didn't give her the push that she truly deserved and that could have propelled her. But the other parts about their careers that I think really talk about the 2000s and is kind of similar is their careers look like you can see evolution through their careers and you can see just experience. Like, I think that their careers just talk about experience, right? Starting young, chasing your dream, being Delulu, going after it, right? And then getting there and it not being exactly what you thought it was going to be, but you still make an impact. And then you find your way, right? Like, I think that Tierra and Nivea have both found their way and they're still like prominent and they're still revered for what they did. I know women to this day who still listen to Complicated, the song, and love it. Sponsored by Tierra Marie just, I think maybe like 2 years ago, just randomly got popping on TikTok. Like, so they definitely have created a legacy and made their mark, but they had to go into different areas. And it's, Pisces is kind of about, you go into it one way, thinking that there's going to be one thing, but then you just kind of go with the tide and the way the tide takes you. And when you think about all four of those signs within that modality, you can see the 2000s R&B and hip hop era all up and through that.
I would like to highlight the artists who had their debut during a natal Aphrodite transit. My hope is to show that Aphrodite can be looked at as valuable when you're trying to break out, become the it girl, and receive some type of attention. So we're going to start with Khalees. She's an Aphrodite in Libra. She actually debuted during a Aphrodite and Libra transit in the 2000s. And this kind of points back to a theory that I have around the Cardinal Aphrodite placements. I think that a lot of artists with Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn are still relevant today. And Sweet is another woman who debuted during a time when her natal Aphrodite was actually transiting. This was in 2002. She dropped Oops Oh My. Next, we have Cassie, who also dropped during a transit of her natal Aphrodite in Scorpio. Me and You is still prominent today. She is still prominent today, and I think this does talk about the fixed energy that will come from a fixed Aphrodite placement. Miss Keisha Cole, she did not debut, but she had a really good run during a time that her natal Aphrodite was transiting in 2007. Carrie Hilson actually debuted as a leading lady in Usher's video during the transit of her natal Aphrodite placement, and this is also the year that she dropped her album.
Okay, so what do I want the takeaway to be for this research? I think that looking at Aphrodite as an asteroid, particularly through the decades, can really show us what people are interested in and want to see and are ready for as far as beauty. Normally, like I said in the beginning, we would just look at Neptune, but I do think that the Aphrodite asteroid can be a helpmate. And by seeing that at least one artist who was prominent during this time had the natal Aphrodite placement that was transiting, it shows like if you keep up with Aphrodite and how she's transiting and you're trying to put yourself out there and like really be somebody who is kind of popular, you could ride that wave. Sorry. You could ride that wave. It's a tool and a marker that people aren't paying attention to, and that could possibly give you an edge. And I would argue that maybe we should pay attention to it, because this was just the study that I zoned in. But even as I was here, I was seeing some indications towards other eras and decades. For example, like I said, cardinal signs being prominent ended up being something that really stood out to me, because I think about someone like Aaliyah and someone like Mary J. Blige. Aaliyah has Aphrodite in Cancer. Mary J. Blige has Aphrodite in Capricorn. Still people prominent to this day. And I feel like in the this decade is not over. So I do think that once we start looking into the 2020s, so from 2020 to 2029, Aphrodite in Cancer is very prominent. Like it's almost like uniform. And the Cardinals are also killing it. I am gonna do the research, but my prediction, I do think that the Cardinals are going to be dominating in the 2010s. Because that's where the Libras will come in. And as I started looking at people who are prominent right now, they had a lot of Aphrodite in Libra and a lot of Aphrodite in Aries. But that Aphrodite in Cancer, because it just resonates with femininity and it resonates with women in general, those people who have Aphrodite in Cancer, they're still important and popular today. And even people with Aphrodite in Capricorn. The other modality that I saw was Aphrodite in fixed signs. So we did have Leo and we did have Aquarius. The Leo women are just the queens. Like, they're just the girlies who are they're not going away. Mariah Carey, like, just sits on the throne. She's literally Queen Charlotte. That is who Mariah Carey is. And that makes sense for Leo. And I would be interested in seeing what era the fixed signs dominated, what decade the fixed signs were kind of big amongst Aphrodite. But again, what I want us to take away from this research is looking at Aphrodite too. If you want to see what is working for a generation, for more so a decade, I should say, or a long standing period of time, I do think that Aphrodite can be helpful if we're talking about beauty, fashion, desirability. It is the thing that catches people's eye. And for your own personal health, look at Aphrodite and see where it's transiting. Try and keep an eye on that, right? And see how that might line up with your personal Aphrodite. And it can give you some guidance on how to put yourself out there if you're looking for more attention. And this can be used in multiple areas of your life. All right, so if you would like a Aphrodite reading from me, you can go to my website and book them. I'm happy to work with you. I also do offer client services for astrology, and this would be a monthly service. You would pay a monthly fee, and every month you would get some type of reading from me. If you just want to see what the month might entail, I can give you a lunar return reading. If you have a very specific question, you'll have the opportunity to get that question answered there. I do offer all other types of readings. I offer natal chart readings, I offer synastry readings, I offer solar return readings, and I do astrocartography readings as well. But make sure you hit that follow button if you want to see what decade I do next and what else I talk about as far as Aphrodite. And I'll see you next time.